little something for the ladies. Now, I'm also available on alternative social media on MeWe, James Desborough, all one word, on Minds, Grimachu. I'm no longer on Gab. I've deleted my account because it's even more exhausting than Twitter. Oi. Murder hobos get a bad rap. Now, you may not know what a murder hobo is. It's a derogatory term used about a certain way in which people play role-playing games, such as Dungeons and Dragons. Murder hobos wander from place to place, killing monsters, killing people, assassinating, thieving from shopkeepers, generally disrupting everything as they go. And this can be problematic for some games masters, and it's a style of play that some people are quite down on, shall we say. But to me, a rampaging band of murder hobos is a style of play, it's a style of story, it's a choice that clearly this particular group of players is making and that they enjoy. And if that's the case, then partially it's your job as a games master to lean into that and to help them have the most fun possible while being a rampaging band of murder hobos. So to me, at least, it's not something to be condemned. Role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, these can be very different things to very different people. There is no one true way to play, and it's unfortunate that so many people, particularly in the sort of new intake into D&D and into RPGs in general, seem to have this very strong idea that it's all about soft roleplay and romance plots and everything else. That's fun, I do those too, but sometimes it's also fun to just play an amoral, monster slaughtering bastard. It's... yeah. It just is sometimes to forget all that other stuff and just enjoy a fight or a sensation of power, a power fantasy, right? Just as it can be fun to roleplay something quite traditional, like rescuing a princess or whatever, that allows you to play out that kind of fantasy. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, and it doesn't reflect on you as a person in real life. It's just a time-honoured story, a way of going about things that's fun. It's not regressive or anything. And similarly, being a rampaging band of murder hobos doesn't reflect on the players really at all. It can be disappointing if as a games master, if as a dungeon master, you've wanted to do something else, but you're just one player out of 6. You know, you're the referee, you're the rule keeper, but you're there to facilitate the stories that the other players want to play, and you're consistently outvoted, so deal with it, otherwise you're going to find yourself down players in no short order. And we do see examples of murder hobos in fiction. I've plucked out 2 examples, there are many others. If we look at The Witcher, here is a dirty, smelly, inhuman, incomprehensible tramp that wanders from village to village slaughtering monsters, and frequently getting into fights with and slaughtering villagers or knights or local mercenaries or the mage that happens to look after the local area or whatever else it might be. And it makes sense there. These are just mercenaries, they're hirelings, they come in and they do something, a horrible job that you don't want to do, or that you're incapable of doing, or that you don't understand. And here comes this smelly hobo with a sword. Sure, here's some money, deal with this monster that's beyond our comprehension for us. Go out there, away from civilization, and keep those things away from us. And once you're done, we're done with you, please leave. We don't want a mass murderer covered in Gorgon blood, hanging around putting people off from the market. It makes sense. For a more complex and more kind of high magic and weird example of this, if you've read the New Crobuzon books, there is a whole subsection and scene within that where management brings in a bunch of mercenaries, adventurers, to deal with the Slake Moth, and they fail spectacularly. But it's really brought home to you how much these are sellswords. They're seen as tomb robbers, bad dudes, mercenaries, not people you'd normally want hanging around, and they have weird gear and weird ideas, and they've travelled around the world, and they've seen things that nobody locally has seen, and they're outcasts. So even in a high magic setting, and high technology setting, relatively speaking, where there are guns and zeppelins and all the rest of this stuff going on, even there, in this version of a magical world, the adventurers are looked down on and seen as something other. And yeah, China Mayville has credited his role-playing experience as being a bit of an influence, particularly on that section. It's a shame we're never going to see that new Crobuzon game. Such a shame. But yeah, this makes sense. These are bands of uncommonly powerful and often rich people who often haven't come from money. In an established feudal system, that's going to seem rather strange. They're capable of doing peculiar and arcane things that probably you've never seen before, you've only heard about in stories, and they come from out there. In most fantasy worlds, the land is replete with monsters of all kinds, and they're all out there. They're beyond the fences, beyond the walls. It's dangerous out there. There are monsters. Here be dragons, and here are people who travel from town to town, city to city, country to country, even something that is massively rare in these kind of pseudo-medieval settings, unless you've got portal technology or you're in a more of a high magic setting with steam trains and so on. But even then, it wasn't until the railways were particularly widespread here in the UK that we even had the same time zones from town to town. And to this day, you go from one village to the next and there'll be subtle differences in accent, or even extreme differences in accent, or the words that are used. It's taken a long time for that to go away. You don't have to go far to encounter accents or old rivalries that are still held up. Someone from the next village is seen the way that we would see a refugee or an immigrant moving into our community. So adventurers who've been all around the world and picked up all kinds of exotic sexually transmitted diseases and equipment and gear, and may not even be the same skin colour as the locals, in any sort of pseudo-medieval setting, that's remarkable and unsettling and alien to these people. So little wonder that adventurers are seen as strange and dangerous and even looked down upon. And they have all these powers, magic, at their command that most people won't have ever seen outside of the hands of maybe the local priest or the local wise woman or whatever else. These are people who are unaccountable due to the sheer amount of power that they have. Going on old guidelines from D&D, typical NPCs that you're likely to run into run roughly the gamut from level 1 to level 6. And you're not going to see any more powerful people than that outside of big cities or courts and so on. Level 6 is considered kind of elite knights and so on. This is based on the old followers rules. Most people you're going to encounter are only going to be level 1 to 3, maybe 4 for the head man of the village, the chief hunter, the main local priest, whatever else. But most are going to be peasants with no particular qualities or powers or abilities, and most of them are only going to be level 1 to 3. So once you're past that, you are essentially beyond the ken and the capability that any of these people will ever have seen, and that makes you unaccountable, because a single adventurer can probably take on a band of level 6 knights without breaking a sweat. So who is going to hold them to account? And that makes them dangerous, and I think this is part of where the whole murder hobo thing comes from, is adventuring parties realizing that they can steal from the merchants and get away with it, because who is going to challenge them? Who is going to face them down? Anyone that does is going to end up dead, more than likely. So very few villagers are going to even choose to stand up. Very few shopkeepers are going to choose to stand up against adventurers. What are you going to do? Report them to the watch? A handful of part-time people with cudgels and hand-me-down rusty chainmail? How's that going to go? if you've just swept through a whole dungeon full of orcs or whatever else. It's not going to go well. And they're disruptive. You know, they come in out of nowhere, carrying all these exotic diseases and this equipment and this weird clothing and casting spells and doing incantations and worshipping gods you've never heard of. Good lord. How's that going to go? And they have all this money. They buy up all the good food, all the good ale, all the good drink, all the good equipment, which is nice for the shopkeepers, but for anyone wanting to get supplies for their farm or whatever, that's going to breed resentment. Yeah, they take up space in the inn. They fuck that barmaid that you've had your eye on for 5+ years, and who you've been wooing relentlessly. Bit of flash, a little song, and away she goes to bed with the bard from that group. Yeah, that's going to breed resentment. So how would you react if, say, you live in a sleepy English village and all of a sudden a bunch of African warlords with Kalashnikovs roll up? Who's going to hold them to account? The village bobby? A couple of farmers with shotguns? What chance are they going to stand against a band of hardened warlords? Not very much, really. You know, you would treat them with fear even if they were there to help, or ostensibly there to help. You just consider how powerless the authorities are. For you to send for help, to get that band of level 6 knights or yeomen or whatever, there isn't a process of hours or even days. It's probably weeks to send a messenger out there. And these are people who are hyper competent. Here's this monster nearby that you want to hire on these adventurers to take out, right? And it's already eaten your captain of the watch and your best hunter, and then they go out and they bring back its head without even breaking a sweat. How terrifying is that? And what are you going to do to get rid of them? Hire another band of adventurers? How's that going to go? So I would say embrace the murder hobos. Go with them. Thus, this whole idea that the world is hostile to them and maybe is going to withhold services, or your whole village might even up sticks and move away if the people are particularly obnoxious. But this hostile atmosphere, it keeps the party on the move, it keeps them looking for new opportunities, it stops them settling down somewhere and grounding the campaign. But at the same time, it grounds the campaign and makes it more gritty and realistic, because you're presenting the reactions of the locals in a way that makes more sense perhaps than hero worship. And it's great for a campaign with a darker tone. And you can pursue them with other adventurers who perhaps have been hired on to take them out. Maybe that merchant they killed, was important or had powerful contacts and friends who can hire someone truly powerful who can really contest them. It just keeps them adventuring, it keeps them rolling on. And I think if we look at the way in which people react to having power in the real world, murder hobos abusing their power and their level advantage over the locals wherever they go, I think it's more realistic. And I think it really helps suspend that sense of disbelief. Zang. Postmortem Studios. Role-playing games, and a lot more to die for. Post-mort.com